everyone, and welcome to Up to Speed. I am Kelley Kurtzman, and I am so honored to be here today hosting you. I lead our Fios sales and service centers. Thank you all for being here. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and Verizon has long been advocates of domestic violence, providing support and solutions to victims and organizations who advocate for victims. The statistics are staggering. 1 in 3 teens, 1 in 4 women, and 1 in 7 men will be impacted by domestic violence at some point in their lifetime. I've personally been engaged since very early in my Verizon career, advocating for employees, increasing awareness, and raising funds. I currently sit as vice chair on the executive board for JBWS, an agency that provides safety, support, and solutions for abuse. Today, you're going to hear from our president and CEO of JBWS, as well as our very own head of security, Mike Mason. But before we do that, we have some stories we'd like to share with you. You may know someone that is a victim of domestic violence, and in some cases, it might even be a Verizon colleague. I would like to say that we know that this episode is emotional and can be heavy, and that there are resources available if you or someone you know is in this situation. Let's take a look.
Make sure to practice self-care before and during the following content, and prepare for possible triggers that may be emotionally challenging. It may help to speak with someone about how you're feeling. Call EAP at 888-441-8674 or text HOME to 741-741 to connect with a crisis counselor who can help move you from an overwhelming moment to a calm place.
Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine Aldana. You may remember me from a couple years ago when I had the privilege to stand alongside Kendra and Jackie in the hashtag 20 per minute documentary. Each of us got a chance to share our stories surviving domestic violence and thriving in our lives since. So today, I'm really excited to be joined by 3 other V-teamers who have agreed to share some of their experience. And ultimately, their hope is to make a difference in somebody else's life. So Drina, Becky, Aleem, it is not at all easy to share details so personal. So please know that I have a deep admiration, respect, and appreciation for each of you. So first question I have is, how have you been impacted by domestic violence?
My experience to domestic violence started early in my childhood years. My mom was actually on the receiving end of domestic violence. If you knew my mom, she is like a strong, strong person. You would never think that, we would be in that situation, but unfortunately we was. You would have thought that was enough for me to learn as a child. When you see things like that and it's all around you and you've experienced it, you would learn from it. But unfortunately, later, it also happened to myself. It started off with thinking that someone was there for me. He didn't want me to go to work. He kept me in the house for 3 days. He didn't allow me to call work. But I had some awesome people that knew something was wrong. And when they called to check on me, they could hear him in the background. And they are the ones who called the cops to come to my apartment. And he knew the cops was coming, so he left before the cops came. And I had to go to the police station and all of that. And I didn't stay there that night. But when I returned the next day, and I lived in like the basement apartment area, so I had like the huge window. He kicked the entire window in. He stole my property, TVs, radio. He just took everything that he could take. And there was never an opportunity for him to put his hands on me again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
First of all, that's a lot. Let's pivot now, Aleem, and let's get your perspective because it's a little different is my understanding, right?
So for me, my sister was in an abusive relationship for 3 years. Prior to that, she was in a physically abusive relationship as well. Now, growing up, my older sister, she was always our warrior. She was our protector. I was made aware of what was happening with my sister was during a holiday get-together, July 4th, a couple years ago, and my sister and her boyfriend came over, as well as friends and family. As I was outside, unbeknownst to me, there was something happening inside the house that I wasn't made aware of. I found out that my sister's boyfriend, he was intoxicated and was just, verbally abusive, making disrespectful comments about my sister, her physical appearance, her attitude. I was emotional, right? I was frustrated. I was angry the most. And ultimately, my initial reaction to that situation really just further pushed my sister away. So it did continue for about another year or so. So ultimately, my sister, she got to her breaking point when she was at her best friend's wedding. She was publicly humiliated by him at the wedding. That's when she kind of became ready to take the next steps. And once she was ready, my family and I, we were there ready to support her through the process of getting out of that bad situation, connecting her with therapy and helping her out with relocation. I was able to reach out to domestic violence survivors, right, and learn more about the course that they took, how did they get out of the situation they were in, how did their family help support them. I obviously realized, the actions that I was taking in the past weren't the best course of actions because it just continued to drive her away, isolated her even more, learning to listen to understand rather than listen to respond with her. And that ultimately allowed me to realize that, this is her journey, right? It's not my journey. So I can't judge her for the actions that she did or did not take to get herself out of the situation, right? I can't immediately fix it as much as I want to. And being there as an emotional support line for her rather than, a shining knight or a knight of armor, right? I continue to go through a process of feeling helpless where, she's always been there to help me throughout my life. And then during her times, I wasn't able to immediately step in.
Just know that by coming on this platform, sharing your experience, talking about it regularly like you do, I mean, you're far from helpless, and I know you're helping your sister, and I know you're helping a lot of other people too. So again, just thank you for doing this. So now we'd like to hear from Becky. Becky, tell us about your experience with domestic violence.
My experience with domestic violence is more of a personal level. I was a victim of an abuser. My boyfriend thought nothing wrong was there until a few months down the line, and his little comments started going up there, more psychological abuse of, you're with me, you're staying with me. The relationship lasted 8 months. Towards the end of the last few months, we were together more and more, and where I couldn't drive my vehicle. It took that freedom away from me, from having the ability to choose when to eat, when to go to the gym, when to work out. Any extracurricular activities I couldn't do without his permission. At that point, when he moved in, it got a lot worse. So I went to the gym, and I wish I hadn't, because that day I came home to find my chin stuck to the front dash of my car, his car, burning, 3-degree burn on my chin, and just horrible things after that. I'd tie my arms behind my back until they're purple. I couldn't feel my wrists anymore. The punching and the hitting kept getting worse. The strangulation. Work started backing up. I started calling out of work more because I was ashamed how to hide the black eyes, how to hide the chunks of hair missing out of my head, how to hide the choke marks around my neck, the burn marks, just how to hide it. And everyone saw it, and one weekend it was really bad. I went to work with 2 black eyes, a knot on my head, and that night before I didn't sleep because he wouldn't let me sleep. That night, I left. I ran away, and I got into a hotel, took my car and got in a hotel because I didn't think I was going to live. And then I went to work that morning because I needed normalcy. I'm like, I need to go to work. I went to work, and he was there at my job waiting for me, and he grabbed me to throw me in my car, and screaming, yelling, punching, and I get out of the car, walk into work, all frazzled. My coworker said, "What is going on?" Nothing. No, something's going on. You tell me right now. And just that moment, him telling me, I opened my eyes. I'm like, holy crap. I could be dead any minute right now. This guy's just a psychotic person to be. And he opened up my eyes and he said, "You're going to the police station right now." I'm like, all right. I left work. I was just too scared to go to the police station because I was like, what happens if he turns the story on me and I did something wrong? I don't want to be in trouble. And when I went back home, he had a pit bull there. And he tied me downstairs with the pit bull and had the pit bull attack me and hurt me. And he took my phone, and this day I just hid in that closet and I called 911 on my Apple Watch. My Apple Watch. He didn't think of taking my Apple Watch away. I call that my day of freedom. Honestly, March 3rd, the 3rd of every month, I celebrate. It's my freedom day because I got my life back. I got my freedom back, but I also got my life back. I'm so glad I did because I'm strong, I'm smart, and I'm beautiful. And I just keep saying those 3 things to myself, and it brings me back to focus of where I am today. I'm not at fault. I survived. It's the one thing I got out of it. It's I didn't do this to myself. It happened to me. I'm the victim.
Thank you for saying that, because it is absolutely not your fault. It is truly a stigma that continues to be prevalent. It's just wrong. So thank you. Thank you so much for putting that out there. Serena, Becky, Aleem, thank you. We really, really appreciate everything you shared today. You guys are incredible and strong. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our V-teamers who shared their stories today. Your bravery is really, truly an inspiration. You can see that video in its entirety later on VZ Web. Diane, thank you so much for joining us today. As the leader of JBWS, I'd like to understand how you define domestic violence, and I'd also like to get your reaction to that video we just shared.
Absolutely, Kelley. It is just my pleasure to be here. Thank you, and thank you Verizon for having me. So really the definition of domestic violence is that it is a pattern of abusive behavior in a relationship, and its sole purpose is either to gain or maintain control over someone else. And really it contains things that many people have heard of, physical abuse, where there's hitting or kicking, and strangulation, which is of significant concern because it is 10 times more likely for a victim of strangulation to be killed by their partner. To things like economic abuse, where the perpetrator really has control over all of the resources and limits the victim's access to them. To things like threatening or stalking. So stalking may be things like excessively calling, texting, following, showing up at your job, which we heard on some of those videos. And in addition to that, there's cyber stalking. It's great that we have this technology and the ability to do things faster and be connected to people, but it is also just another way that abusers have to gain control and abuse their victims.
Thank you so much, Diane.
Sure.
So there's been a lot of conversation around the COVID-19 pandemic and people being, at home with their abusers in many cases. And so what can you talk about in terms of signs that we would recognize if we have friends or colleagues that are potentially in this, dangerous situation? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, so, domestic violence doesn't typically just stay home, so it will follow someone to work. And some of the signs you've already heard people talk about in the video, and it was actually someone that helped her seek help because he saw some of the signs: excessive lateness, showing up to work being disheveled, a change in appearance. All of those things are really concerning. And so some of the other things that COVID brought on, if you think about how isolating it was just for the general public, where, the governor said, stay home, stay safe, that wasn't really what the situation was for victims of domestic violence, because they were literally trapped at home with their abusers. So some of the ways that I already talked about what some methods of abuse are when we're talking about physical, intimidating threats. They were really similar during COVID, but what happened is that there was this rationale now for why abuse was being used. So that there was some excessiveness in, saying, make sure that you clean your hands or make sure that you change your clothes, to inciting more fear and anxiety around catching COVID or spreading COVID to their children, to many things that we saw were things like not releasing children during visitation or custody, saying that that victim would pose a risk to the children. So many of the ways that abusers would abuse victims were the same. They just almost had this stamp of a rationale behind it that COVID gave, because across the state and really across the nation, the calls to helplines dropped significantly, almost disappeared. And we were so frightened because of that. And we knew domestic violence didn't go away. It just went a little further underground because they were consistently monitored and supervised, which is another thing that happened during COVID, because they were under constant supervision, where prior to that, they would have had the ability to either go to work or reach out to some of their friends, neighbors, go to a counseling appointment, where they were literally trapped at home.
Wow. If you see some of those signs, Diane, what are some of the steps you can take to provide support?
Absolutely. That is just a great question, because if you see something like you heard on the video, many times it's someone stepping up and saying something that makes all of the difference. The worst that could happen is if you ask somebody, they say that they don't want to talk about it, right? But one of the things that you should do is approach them in a confidential way and let them know that whatever they tell you is safe, safe with you, and that you're not going to talk to other people about their story, to be compassionate and non-judgmental, because it's really difficult for victims of domestic violence to talk about what their situation is, because oftentimes there's so much shame that's connected to it. So if they do, and they are willing to talk about what happened to them, be very clear about what you've observed that causes the concern. So some of the symptoms that we've heard about, some of those red flags, being late or crying or just a really significant behavior change. And then it would be great if you know that domestic violence is present, that you become part of their safety plan whenever it's safe for you to do so, so that you could keep some documents for them or some resources for them, so that they would have access to them if they do decide to leave, and they may not decide to leave. So sometimes it's really hard to be supportive to someone in that situation, to not judge them if they're not ready to leave that relationship. When a victim leaves their relationship, they are literally at their most dangerous times. So it's really important to be aware of that, to be aware of some national resources that are available, but to also be aware of some local resources, because there's always someone 24/7 who is accessible to help in that situation, to help get someone out of a relationship, or just to provide another supportive ear. So it's going to make a difference if you are just a supportive listener. It could make a difference, because when they are ready to leave, they know that they have that support.
Such great advice, Diane. Thank you so much for sharing. Finally, we want to make sure we as V-teamers know what we can do to help. And we have our head of security joining us today, Mike Mason. Thank you, Mike, for being here. Mike, I know you two have a personal connection to domestic violence, and so I'd love to get your reaction to the video we shared, and then we can get into more specifics around what we could do as V-teamers.
Well, thanks, Kelly. I really appreciate all the V-teamers who came on today, because every time that we do this, it drags this scourge further and further out of the closet. We give people license to talk about this thing, license to share experiences, and hopefully we'll give them a path to either avoid or to extract themselves from such situations. The video was very powerful, but their experiences are one thing I always say about domestic violence. It's not like a cold that you get over and then you're fine and you forget about the cold. It impacts people's lives, and it impacts them oftentimes oftentimes for the rest of their life. So it really was very, very valuable in my mind for these V-teamers to come on and talk about their experiences, including Aleen's, because one of the things we try to do in security is it's sort of like a Hippocratic oath. We try first to do no harm. And just as Diane said, we make sure we don't embarrass anyone. We don't make anyone feel silly. We make sure that we're going to be their ally. We're not going to expose their story. We're not going to judge them. We're going to give them some options. And we work with our HR partners and other partners within Verizon, but we're not going to force them to take any particular option. We're just going to try to give them things that they can do. And we've produced a 3-pager that talks about a safety plan. And I think we tried to cover just about every imaginable scenario, but we update it periodically, and that's available for any of our V-teamers right online.
Thank you, Mike. Diane talked about some of the signs that we should be looking for as colleagues. What are some of the things that we can do to support as V-teamers, and what are some of the things that the company is doing to support these victims, these employees, these V-teamers that might be in this situation?
Well, as I've said in many town halls, we always talk about the Verizon family. If there's ever a time I really feel that whole Verizon family, it's when we're dealing with a crisis situation and you've got a handful of senior people coming together to figure out what can we do. Fortunately, we are a large company, and that gives us options that may not be available for a mom and pop. So, for example, we can have employees work at a different location. We can make sure that their names are removed from the directory so that an ally of theirs who doesn't know what the situation is at home, doesn't inadvertently give the information about where they're working today, because we can put them in a different city oftentimes. So the bottom line is we can do a number of things. We can make sure they have parking inside. We can alert our local security that if they see a particular car of a particular model, or if they see the abuser, if we have a picture, we can tell them to alert the police. So there are a number of things we can do typically that are based on the situation the employee finds themselves in. But the main thing I want employees to know is we're allies. We're going to be leaning forward to do whatever it is we can do and whatever the situation allows us to do, and most importantly, whatever the employee wants us to do.
Thank you, Mike, so much. I feel safer already. Just know that you and your team are involved in this and there for us. We have so many resources available for our employees, and we just added a new learning plan that you can find out on the Learning Portal 2.0. And I want to give a shout out here to Kate Aldana, as well as the L&D team and the many volunteers that help pull this information together, because it's really great information. So on this slide here, you can see the learning plan is packed with tons of great information, bringing together content from places like the Center for Relationship Abuse Awareness and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, HuffPost, TED Talks, and so much more. So whether you've got 5 minutes or 30 minutes, whether you know somebody who is impacted, or you're just interested in learning more about how you can support awareness, you can find the perfect article or video, and we'll have the link to the learning plan for you on the web. On the next slide, you can see through our volunteer portal, we also have opportunities for employees to make a difference in supporting organizations that support victims of domestic violence. There are opportunities to leverage your professional skills to help organizations strengthen their work, become a volunteer listener to help victims through emotional stress, and even send letters or drawings to encourage and inspire survivors. In addition, you can lace up with your fellow V-teamers and take a walk in honor of advocacy of domestic violence victims. In addition to the walk, you can create original content for JVWS's YouTube channel by reading books or creating family-friendly content. All the details on these opportunities are on the VZ web. If you or someone you know is in a domestic violence situation, please know that help is available. And we'd also like to ask you to get engaged this month. I know in the customer service organization, we have activities that are coming up. We've got something we're doing next week. We're putting the nail in domestic violence by painting your nail purple, dressing in purple. And so there's lots of ways to support. I'd like to thank so much Mike and Diane for you to be here today. We appreciate your support. We will be back here on Monday. And for now, you're up to speed.